All right, welcome to a live Third Apron podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. And the draft is now less than a week away. I'm so used to it being on Thursday, but now being moved up to Wednesday, and part two is Tuesday. And joining me to discuss, we're going to talk about just some of the top players, some recent developments, but also just kind of look ahead and do a little mock draft of our own. Joining me to discuss is draft analyst Bryan Kalbrosky for the Win. Brian, thank you for joining in. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Yossi. It's really fun to be able to do this with you, man. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad the schedule is lined up and that we've got time to look ahead because this next week should be pretty crazy, both with the draft, but also potentially other transactions surrounding the draft too. I think there's going to be a decent amount of movement and salaries thrown around. So a fun time for you as well as me.
Yeah, I mean, it's already started. I did not expect that Desmond Bain trade. That was unexpected, but also just the timing of it for a trade that big that early. Then we just had that little draft trade. So things are already happening. And I remember, so now this year they changed the rules where teams can start negotiating with their own free agents right after the finals end. So, it's very possible that negotiation window could start as early as tonight. I don't think there were any agreements though right away. I think teams and we're trying to be careful with like getting flagged for tampering or anything like that. So I think there was like I think even the day after there wasn't an agreement, but either way, we are looking at the possibility that the unofficial start of free agency is tonight, and maybe in the coming days we do get some agreements for teams with their upcoming free agents, and also players that can sign an extension starting on July 6th. That's the rule now. So we could see some agreements up to the lead up of the draft and free agency. But yeah, I mean, let's start talking about the draft. So when was the last you've been doing some you usually do some mock drafts. When was the last one you did?
So the last one was earlier this month, and we will have another one in the next day or two. And earlier this month was when the early entry withdrawal deadline was. So that was basically when we knew all of the guys who were going back to college that had pulled out of the draft. And actually, it's significant this year because with NIL, you look at the NIL money and you look at the rookie scale contract, and you basically figure out, am I going to make more money in college or am I going to make more money at wherever I'm projected to go right now? And for many players like Boogie Flan, for example, who was a five-star player coming into college, he was able to get more money in the transfer portal than wherever he would have um, whatever pick he was going to go. I had Boogie late first, early second, which means maybe not necessarily that guarantee 4 year deal. And he was transferred to Florida, where he's got a multi-million-dollar NIL package waiting for him. And there were several players like that. Yaxel Lendeborg, I think, was the biggest winner of the NBA draft combine. It didn't raise his draft stock so much as it raised his NIL valuation in Michigan. And that happened with a few different players as well. And across the board, it's just a really fun way to kind of have almost a number for these agents and evaluators to look at and be like, well, where's the money going to be greater? Is it going to be in the guaranteed sure thing of the NIL package we have in front of us, or is it the variance of the NBA draft where a team could tell me I'm 15 on their board, but maybe I slide a little bit on draft night if somebody unexpectedly falls to them and they're suddenly not guaranteeing me anymore, and I'm now pick 27. So that was the last time we had my mock go live, and I'm definitely looking forward to having the next one with all the latest updates. We've had a trade with Memphis, go moving back into the first round to get the pick that had belonged to the Magic, and also the Pacers made a trade as well, which was a draft pick trade too. So there's been
Yep.
multiple different transactions worth following. So lots of fun.
So so I'll admit the draft is probably my weakest. The thing like as like the thing pay the least attention to, like prospects as far as my NBA coverage, but the implementation of NIL, well, definitely it's kind of like cap adjacent, so that might interest me. Where it's like, okay, where maybe like if I learn more about some of these players, I could get an idea of which ones might actually be financially motivated to stay versus go.
Exactly.
we'll see. Yeah, I mean, we'll see if even that. We'll see just how viable that is over the years. But like you said, with that example you brought up, that is a thought I had, and we saw it in practice. So, and yeah, we had a couple trades you mentioned. So the Grizzlies back in the first round, picking 16th, two selections higher than the pick that they sent out to the Wizards. So kind of a wash as far as their draft positioning. Um, we might as well touch on them now. Just I wonder if they're going to try to move up, because it's been a while since they had a selection in quite this high, and I wonder if that's what maybe along the way, like they're probably looking to save some money so they could renegotiate, extend Jaren Jackson Jr. But maybe along the way they can move up. Maybe the Rockets, they're I would imagine 10 is very much available. Maybe that's an avenue right there. Indiana, I didn't really touch on this trade too much. I like it for the Pacers a little bit more. I think, if you're the Pacers, you already know what this year's draft is. You know who the prospects are. You know what you can get in your range. So if you're already not really in love with anyone you can get there, I think it makes sense to get your pick back next year. I think the expectation is that the Pacers are probably going to be really good, be a 50-win team again, have a pick in the same range it is now. But you never know. Like, things can happen. The Grizzlies can tell you firsthand. They were looking like a home court advantage team early on in this past season, and a couple bad weeks, some injuries. They went all the way down from like 25 to 18, something like that. So things can change. So
Well,
you
look a
can,
couple of years ago when the Warriors ended up getting the number two pick. Obviously that was largely because Steph broke his hand a few games into the season. They weren't expecting to go that high. So I know exactly what you mean.
yeah. So you never know when like an injury can happen. You never like things can happen. So I think it just makes more sense for risk mitigation that the Pacers did that trade. And for the Pelicans are just betting that the Pacers will be pretty good next year, and there's probably someone they like that they can get around 23. So let's just start at the top. I already filled in Cooper Flag to Dallas, Dylan Harper to San Antonio. I've also got your previous mock draft in front of me. I mean, anything we should say about those two selections, or is that like, is that just chalk still?
Yeah, I think it's mostly chalk. I think the one thing that will kind of go ahead is just get in front of the Ace Bailey stuff is to say that, Cooper immediately met with the Mavericks and had multiple dinners and insisted on working out. And I think that that's a really interesting detail is like, hey, everyone and their mother knows that the Mavericks are picking Cooper Flag at number one, and they're not trying to trade it for Giannis, which was something that was briefly speculated on lottery night for a good reason, I think. But ultimately, the fact that Flag is like such a competitive person that he insisted on working out with them anyway suggests everything you need to know about his character and why I think he's going to be a successful pro. I think he's got that competitive edge. I interviewed his teammate Con Knipple recently, as did a lot of the NBA media, and Con told me a story that he also shared on the Bill Simmons podcast about how there was a scrimmage before the season, and Jimmy Butler essentially happened at Duke, where Cooper Flag played with one team and won with everybody, switched teams, beat them all again. And it's just that competitive edge that I think is going to really be a huge part of Cooper Flag's identity, beyond just the things we already know about him on the basketball court. Is his personality and that driven edge to, play and win and compete at the highest levels. He reclassified. He should be a senior in high school right now. Instead, he was the best player in college basketball. And I think, number one with the bullet for a reason. So really excited to see what he does in Dallas. And I think it's going to be an impactful move as they rebuild their franchise post Luca.
Yeah, for what it's worth, they already leaked on their website that that's the plan. They're going to select them. I just feel like at this point, now that you have the opportunity to select them, I wouldn't have gone with the direction they did trading Luca for what they did. But now that you have the opportunity to build around Cooper, I think it's even more reason to uh to blow it up and fully build around Cooper. Doesn't seem like they want to do that just yet. Seems like they still want to justify the move, make a deep playoff run, and yeah, it'll be kind of a. It feels like it'll be kind of a strange season for the Mavs, especially because no Kyrie for most of it, if at all. I mean, how I think that championship win that they put together when they selected when they traded Luke, I feel like it's already gone, realistically.
Yeah, I do wonder, and we can, move to draft stuff ASAP, what they plan to do with the one for the beginning of the season. And I think maybe you and I have speculated maybe Chris Paul wants to have that interim role essentially, play another year for a contender and kind of, be a facilitator and be a mentor for Cooper Flag during his first year. Just a guy willing to, be basically a mercenary for this Maverick squad until Kyrie comes back. So I'd be really curious to see, who Cooper Flag's point guard is going to be, because obviously that's going to be a huge factor into, how he succeeds. Because every time, you play basketball, your point guard is going to be a huge reason for why you succeed or don't succeed, and that's going to be impactful. But I
Yeah.
think, definitely only so much to really say on the Cooper Flag front, because he is the number one pick, and I think he'd be number one pick in many drafts besides the Wembanyama draft. I think he'd be
Yeah.
ahead of a lot of the guys that we've seen in them go number one in the past 6, 7
And
years, even.
as far as number two, I guess it's still Dylan, but a lot of the trade speculation that came early on when as soon as they jumped up to number two seems to have really precipitated a lot of league wide belief that they'll keep the pick selected. So I guess that's a bigger question if they actually do find a trade that involves them. I still think it's possible, but yeah, it seems like I don't think that makes sense for KD trade. I don't really understand even their appetite to go after him, to be honest. But unless Giannis is coming, it feels like they'll probably make the selection. They could trade it later if needed, but it seems like Dylan Harper will be a Spur.
Yeah, and I know that Philly is apparently angling to try to move up to get number two pick. I totally get why Philly would want to do that. I think that there's a lot of speculation of that, teams are trying to move up to two. Obviously, there's no way to include the number two pick for a Kevin Durant trade. That makes no sense. 14, which we could talk about later, might be more in play, obviously, with some salary matching if San Antonio were to go after Durant. One thing I want to say on the Dylan Harper front is that I think that he is the clear best player available, and you don't have to factor in the fact that you have either De'Aaron Fox or Stephon Castle into the equation. I am of the belief that Stephon Castle is not a true point guard. He's a wing that has some playmaking ability. And I think he can absolutely play with Dylan Harper. I do not think that Castle needs the ball in his hands to succeed. And ultimately, your offense is never going to run through Stephon Castle when you have Wembanyama on your team anyway. I think he's a complementary piece. That's a really solid complementary piece. You've got a good player there in Castle. And I think that De'Aaron Fox maybe becomes more expendable, in a bigger deal if you have the insurance of drafting Dylan Harper. And I think that that's really interesting is that now, you could use Fox as the salary filler in a different deal should another star become available and want to play with Wembanyama. And I think you and I can go through the list and across the NBA, every single player in the NBA is going to want to play with Wembanyama if they can.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth that I, as far as now Fox's situation, I think they'll probably keep him. They're probably going to give him an extension. But as far as a long term fit, I think now that the Spurs are in this opportunity to bring in Harper, they already have Castle. Yeah, they're not like you said, they're not like true point guards, so to speak. But if both of them end up being like they develop well and they could be a part of the long term fit with the Spurs, yeah, then maybe that changes the dynamic with Fox. I know Fox really like, that's where he wanted to be,
Right.
uh, but you know it's kind of just a change of circumstances. They didn't expect to go up this high, and that I think that is something that maybe down the line they could explore, especially if like let's say they do trade for a third max player like Giannis, things will get pretty expensive. So in order to help maximize that window around Wembanyama and Giannis, okay, maybe you could look to trade Fox if Harper and Castle get to where they need to be for the Spurs to comfortably do that. And they gave up very little to get Fox, so that would be a really good piece of business. To go from trading like really like one good first round pick to get him to maybe getting multiple, and maybe another better, maybe like another high level wing. So this is like more down the line stuff.
Yeah.
I would agree. Most likely they take Harper and stick with Fox for now.
One thing I do want to say on Harper, just as a player evaluation metric that I find to be interesting, is that he is off the charts when it comes to unassisted field goals made at the rim. We have not seen a point guard of this caliber with his ability to create his own shot at the basket. And I think that's going to be, in some part, a product of the fact that he was on a Rutgers team last year that just simply wasn't very good. They had two five-star recruits and didn't make the tournament. That's usually a red flag about the rest of the roster. But the fact that he has got the ability to play with the ball in his hands and create his own basket at the rim is a huge indicator of success for NBA guards, I think. And you see that with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You see that with Jalen Brunson. You see that with James Harden. You see that with Cade Cunningham. A lot of the guards that have had the most success are the ones that can score at the basket and not get eaten alive up there. And he's got good positional size for a guard, and I think that it's going to translate really well. I spoke to Dylan Harper earlier this year, and one of the things that he told me is that his mom didn't let him shoot jump shots as a kid. Um, he basically grew up being able to finish at the basket. That was what he was taught how to do. And eventually he was able to start shooting jumpers, and his jumpers come along fairly well, and he can, shoot fairly well. And it's now, a facilitator and a guard for a reason because he's got that jumper. But that was how he learned how to become such a good finisher, as that was his only way of scoring for so long. And on the other side of his family tree is his dad, who is a six-time NBA champion, Ron Harper. So got clearly has the basketball in the blood on both sides of the family. His mom's a coach. Dad's an NBA champion. His brother, Ron Harper Jr., plays I believe, on a two-way contract. He was
In
also a
Detroit
Rutgers
right now?
guy, and
Yeah.
I think it's Detroit as well. Yeah, and I think that he's just going to be in a great position to succeed for many years. He's a pro. He's going to fit that Spurs culture really well, and I wouldn't move that pick if I'm San Antonio. That's a blessing they have it.
So now here's where the draft really starts. Now I do want to specify that this what we're gonna do. So more or less, Brian's updated mock draft. Eventually he'll release his next one. We're do this one specifically. It's more so what we see the teams doing, assuming they stay in these positions. We'll discuss like obviously the possibility of doing trades, but this is right now more so what we feel, more so what Brian feels like that the team would do, not so much like best player available. Anything about that before we move ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's two ways to do mock drafts. It's the kind of intel based, what makes the most sense thing. And then there's, hey, if I were in charge of this team, here's what I would do. And, I think that based on, our collective brains with your understanding of, what the team needs and, my understanding of the prospects, I think that we should be able to get a pretty good sense of at least something kind of predictive. Obviously, there's going to be a couple trades on draft night that throw off everything, and one moving piece is going to make the whole thing unravel. And very few of these will be correct. But I think when you do mock drafts, it's all about the process you use to get there. And I think that we're using a smart process here to get a guy who knows the salary cap and a guy who knows what teams are looking for and kind of their typical identity and culture. I think you've got a great scope of that, and that's always shown in your work as well.
And so with I've there hasn't been much movement in the lottery in the past few years. Like for the most part, teams stay put, and I think that this lottery got so chaotic where some of the top four teams, I feel like there's a much greater chance of some movement up there for the first time in years. Uh, Felt pretty strongly about the Spurs right after it happened. Now, as we discussed, probably not. But there's the Sixers, just a logical trade down candidate. You can look at all the teams selecting below them. There's probably a logical deal that they could put together that makes sense where the Sixers move down, maybe save some money. Um, I did a mock off season on the Sixers where that was the main type of framework I explored. But you last had Ace Bailey number three. Would you like to make an update to that, or who's number three?
Yeah, so it's really funny because all season I had VJ at number three. And then immediately after the lottery and Philly had the number three pick, once again I had VJ at number three because I thought about Daryl Morey as an analytics guy, and frankly, Ace Bailey never had good metrics. Like his box plus minus was simply bad at Rutgers. It was among the worst we've seen from projected lottery pick in the Bart Torvik era, which is where I find most of my college stats. And I know that Daryl Morey doesn't necessarily use BPM as his end all be all, but I know that obviously that's going to matter a little bit, is how the guy performed in college when it comes to other metrics and other evaluation perspectives. And for me, I think that VJ is the guy who's going to pass, the two things you want most in a prospect, which is can he shoot and what's his athleticism look like? There's almost a little bit of Benedict Mathurin to him, where he's got both of those things, and he's still young. He looked great for the Bahamas national team, playing at the highest level before college even began. And I'm just gonna say that the one time I moved Ace to the three spot, I immediately regretted it upon publishing it, and my next mock draft will not have um, Ace at three, and I don't think I'll have him at four either. Let's put it that way.
Wow. So VJ at 3 to the Sixers, which is really interesting, mainly because the Quentin Grimes situation. I still feel like they're gonna bring him back, but if they stay at 3 and select a guard like VJ, maybe that changes things as far as if they want to keep Quentin, maybe that could turn into a sign and trade opportunity where, all you really gave up was Caleb Martin to get him. If you can maybe there's a team out there who really liked what Quentin did. Maybe they could get like a first round pick for him. That'd be really nice. So obviously, I think they'll look to trade down first. There's a number of guys within like that 4 through 9 range that I'm sure the Sixers are looking at that could make a lot of sense there. Oh, you disappeared. What happened?
I'm still
Hmm.
here. I'm still here.
For some reason, your face isn't
Give me
showing right now.
my camera cut out.
There we
Here we
go.
go.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying there could be some trade down opportunities there. So and then yeah, the Quentin Grimes potentially being impacted if they
Yeah.
take a guard at 3. So then, well, let me ask you then. So should we go to number 4? Should we discuss a little more
Well,
about Ace
yeah,
Bailey?
I want to discuss. Well, I think we'll get to Ace Bailey later. I want to discuss something I'm seeing in the comments from one of the people, which is how does Philly make it work with McCain, Maxey, and Edgecombe? And I think ultimately the answer to that question is TBD, right? But VJ was a very good defensive prospect for much of the year. He was a good defensive playmaker. Maxey and McCain, less so elite on the defensive end of the floor. I think VJ is going to provide a little bit of that. McCain was a really good floor spacer as a shooter. VJ is a pretty prolific dunker. He's one of the few prospects, few underclassmen who put up as many dunks and three pointers as he did last season. It was just him and Cooper Flagg who reached the thresholds that they did. And I think at this point, you're just drafting for talent and for character and for just potential. And I think that ultimately, VJ is going to be able to be the guy who makes the most sense for that reason. And, as for the three of them, what positions do they play? Is VJ maybe going to not necessarily overlap in minutes with them if he's a little bit on the undersized side for the three? Potentially, yeah. But I don't think that you're trying to draft the best small forward available. I mean, ultimately, you're just trying to get as much talent in the room as you possibly can, especially
Mhm.
considering Philly's got kind of the multiple timeline thing right now. And I think that VJ is just the standout fit there.
Yeah, I just take the best player available. Like even because if they just plan too much to being competitive next year, like there's a very good chance just based on everything going on, they still might not be very competitive next year. In which case, like you might regret taking the not taking the best player available. Just take the player, worry about fit a little later. So yeah, you had VJ at 4 last time, the Charlotte. So who do you got at 4 now?
I'll be having Continental there. I think that He's somebody that I think that Philly would probably consider at the 3 pick as well. Khan is somebody that, I told you guys earlier I interviewed and I was excited to interview. He is just somebody who plays the game the right way. He's one of those guys who doesn't need the ball in his hands to make an impact. I know that Charlotte is looking for high character individuals who are going to be able to, be a part of their culture. And I think that Khan, it has been a winner at every level. In fact, Khan actually had the highest raw plus minus of any player in college basketball last season. That goes a long way. Like that's not just because he played for a really good Duke team or because he played with Cooper or Common Malawak. I think that he is just genuinely one of the better players in college basketball. I think he would have gotten, first team All-American looks, and he actually won ACC tournament MVP when Cooper Flag went down, and he was a true freshman as well. I think that he's a player I believe in, shoulders up, right mentality, and I think that you know if Philly doesn't take him at 3, Charlotte's going to be excited to take him at 4. I also think that those could easily swap. If you and I, are right about our suspicions about, potential fit, like Khan could be a great fit for Philly as well if they're looking for a floor spacer. And he's a great culture fit too. And I think that VJ, would be someone that Charlotte would sprint to the podium to pick too as well, especially as someone who could potentially anchor their defense. So I know that, VJ is somebody who I would also consider the likely pick at 4 in this outcome, where he's still not on the clock. So I think that's the guy that I would go with.
Yeah, yeah, like you just said, a guy that we could see the Sixers target if they do a trade down too. All right then, who do you have at 5 right now?
Well, you and I were texting for a bit earlier today, and I think that you have kind of helped convince me that Common Malawak's going to be the guy there. I think that it's sort of a tough uh, thing to imagine at first when you think about Walker Kessler, but if you think about what the market could look like for him, you kind of reset that rookie scale contract, get a guy who can potentially have a similar role. And have him cheaper, and so then you get a return for Walker Kessler in the trade market. And I think, like you had mentioned earlier to me, the potential return will probably be stronger than the one that the Lakers offered for Mark Williams. So you can probably get a decent amount, for Walker Kessler in return. You don't have to pay him. And frankly, I don't know if the Jazz are in a huge rush to be good again right now. Common Malawak is still a project. He's a young player. He did lead college basketball last year in alley-oop, so he is a bit of a lob threat. I'm excited to see, if that translates because every team loves a lob threat. Every point guard loves a lob threat. But I think that Utah is a team that is going to have their eyes on him for a long time. And the other thing that, you and I don't know yet is how Austin Ainge is going to move as head of the front office. So this is going to be a really telling pick. I think that Utah makes sense for Common Malawak, but also, this is going to be a harder one to predict right now with their new front office.
Yeah, that's what I was about to add is that it's still unclear exactly what Austin, if there's going to be any shift in the direction. Obviously, his father Danny's still involved, so who knows? But even if there is more of a motivation to move things forward a little bit, they're just so behind. They don't have a guy right now like a top. They don't have a cornerstone, so I could see them maybe deciding. Yeah, like you said, if now Walker Kessler's about to be extension eligible, uh, they can extend them, and they'll still have a lot of cap flexibility going forward. Um, so I think it's more so the question: one, do you think Walker's going to be worth that money? And if not, then do you want to cash in, get a pretty big haul for him before that big contract kicks in, and then that way, yeah, you just reset your timeline a little bit more. And
Yeah.
in that case, it would make sense to bring in a big man.
And I'm going to include one more little detail here, which is that the 2026 NBA draft is headlined by AJ Dubinsta. AJ Dubinsta just got a massive NIL haul to go to BYU. the largest donors to NIL at BYU are the owners of the Jazz, Ryan Smith, and also Danny Ainge, who played at BYU himself. I think that there might be a little bit of a pipeline to wanting the number one pick for the Jazz next season. They wanted it this year. I think they're going to want it again. DeVince's not a big man, so there's not necessarily going to be a huge positional overlap there. So that's kind of my speculation there, is that they've got the eyes on being maybe bad for another year before they go ahead and maybe make their push. So Laurie
Yeah.
Markkanen's probably available as well, is my guess.
Yeah, I'm sure they're listening on all offers for him. All right, up next, Washington. If they fell from 2 to 6, who do you see them selecting there now?
So they would be, I think, pretty focused on Jeremiah Fears. That's the guy that I'm going to have them selecting, and that seems to be the reported rumored guy as well. Jeremiah Fears has reportedly had multiple workouts with the Jazz as well. So I know that's somebody they're considering. So I think that's about his range. Jeremiah is somebody that I interviewed. He was a really fun player to watch at Oklahoma. Honestly, every Oklahoma like top prospect ends up being pretty fun to watch because the offense essentially runs through them. We saw that with Trey Young. We saw that with Buddy Hield. We saw that with Austin Reeves. Oklahoma loves to give the keys to the car to a player, and Jeremiah was that guy this year. He's another player who, like Cooper Flag, reclassified to become the freshman in college rather than a senior in high school. So he's one of the youngest players in the draft for US-based prospects. And I think that he's somebody who is going to be, an interesting guard to watch develop. I think he's, still a project. He'll basically be sharing the backcourt with Bub Carrington. I think that he'll be the one, and Bub will probably be the two. And I think that ultimately Jeremiah Fears is a smart pick for the Wizards. It's a tough guy to pick after you've lost, 16, after won only 16, 17 games last year, right? Like I think that ideally you would want, Cooper or Dylan in that scenario, and to end up with Fears is a tough pill to swallow for the Wizards, but that's the new lottery luck. It is what it is, and hopefully they have the better luck next year with those odds. But I think Fears seems to be the guy that's impressed them the most so far.
Yeah, just like with Utah, just take the best guy available. Doesn't matter if you have already another guard there that you want to develop. Just get the best player, figure it out later. All right, up next, New Orleans.
So I'm going to point out that Yahoo's Kevin O'Connor did report that Ace Bailey is somebody that the Pelicans covet. And then today, Mark Stein and Jake Fisher said that that might be a little bit overstated. Um, and so there's something to kind of watch there, is how much do the Pelicans really like Ace Bailey? And if Ace Bailey is angling for a destination, is that destination New Orleans? We have a new front office with Joe Dumars. In decision making. So I think like Utah, it's a little bit hard to predict. I'm not entirely sure what to make of what New Orleans is going to do. I'm just going to say that out front because we haven't seen them pick yet. There was a report from Jeff Goodman from the Field of 68 that Derek Queen is a guy they really like. I like Derek Queen. I would be interested in putting him there, but they just drafted Yves Missi last year, and I don't think that they're going to pick another big man back-to-back years in the first round. So I think just best player available at this point is definitely Trey Johnson. So Trey Johnson from Texas, electrifying scorer, good shooter, really just like the kind of guy that could be on the clock as soon as three. And I think every team picking between 3 and 7 or 3 and 8, is going to have him in their big board pretty high. And I think just best player available, that is Trey Johnson. And I think that, you essentially have a young scoring guard who can make an impact.
Yeah, you mentioned it's new front office. We have no idea what they might do. It wouldn't shock me if they trade this pick. Uh, I guess some of the motivation that went to the front office change might be just to really like pick things up, try to be more competitive. Obviously, like the big problem with New Orleans was the injuries. Not real. I think the previous front office did a good job. like identifying a lot of good talent. They were one of the best drafting teams in the past 6 years. So we'll see what ends up happening. I think out of all these teams so far, I think there's like a pretty decent chance that they might do something with this pick. I do feel like Philly and New Orleans could be pretty natural
Yeah,
trade partners if they want to do something.
absolutely. And I want to say that I think it's Trey Johnson. I'm not sure about his fit with New Orleans, mostly because I don't know what their plan is. But I don't see any scenario where he really falls much farther than this, because he's done everything right in the pre-draft process, from what I understand. I think he's interviewing well. I think that he had a really great freshman season at Texas. He's one of the top 7 players in this draft period. And so I think that, all of the teams picking from 3 to 8 are going to have him there.
Yeah,
So
and
number
and
8,
the,
this is where the excitement happens. Oh, go ahead, Vic, what you were going to say though.
I was just gonna say, and the Pelicans need another guard right now. I mean, they have a lot of guards, but they need now with Murray out, they could use another guard.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
So
go ahead.
number eight. I'm live in Brooklyn right now. That's where I live. I am somebody who enjoys going to Brooklyn Nets games, and I'll be at Barclays Center for the NBA draft. And I think around this point, if our mock draft is correct, there's going to be a lot of buzz in the building for Ace Bailey. Um, I don't see him falling past this point. I don't think it's going to be a Shadur Sanders situation. I don't see a situation in which it's a Cam Whitmore situation. I don't think reporters speculate it to be that way either. I think 8 is probably the spot that's the lowest he could go. Um, Brooklyn, I think at this point, just takes their guy. I think that Ace probably wants to be in Brooklyn. I think that this might all be a manufactured move to get Ace in a good market, like Brooklyn. It's been a lot of buzz, not necessarily for the right reasons, but on draft night in Brooklyn, where the draft is held, everyone's going to be talking about it. The fans there are going to be Brooklyn Nets fans. There's going to be a lot of buzz. I think this is about his floor. I know that there's other guys on the board that I think Brooklyn would also have interest in. Nolan Traore, from France, is somebody who I know has been linked to Brooklyn, but Brooklyn has multiple picks in the first round. There's going to be potentially some movement involving Brooklyn as well. They have 4 first round picks right now. I don't think they're going to roster 4 first round rookies necessarily. So, maybe they move around a little bit to move up to pick Ace at 6 or 5 or something like that, or even at 7. I don't know what exactly Brooklyn does, but I think that this is a natural fit, where it's Brooklyn picking Ace Bailey.
Okay. Yeah, you answered my question if we could see a bigger fall. I mean, it's been one less than 24 hours since all the reports came out of him canceling his workout and whatever else came out. So we'll see. We still have 6 days, but all right. So that's already a pretty big drop. 3 to on most consensus mock drafts down to 8 for now. All right. So now we're getting to the latter half of the lottery. Who do you see then going to Toronto at 9?
Yeah, so I think that Toronto's in an interesting position, um, because I'm not entirely sure what they're building either. But I think that if they're looking for a big man, at this point, you know, they've had a few draft picks and a few bites at the apple recently, and they've made some moves for, guys like Ingram and Quickly, and they've recently picked Grady Dick, and I think at this point it might be time for a big man. I think that, Common Malawak is a guy who gets mocked there a lot. I think because of the potential ties that, people see to their front office there. I think the other best big man available left is Derek Queen. I don't know if he's necessarily going to work in the NBA. I don't know. But he's one of my favorite players to watch. He's a lot of fun. He is sort of a dribble pass shoot, guy in theory, which Toronto's liked in the past. And I think that ultimately, he's got a pretty wide range of outcomes. His athleticism at the combine was frankly bad. But he seems to be a great kid who plays basketball the right way. And I think that in a team that has been positionless in the past, he's a great playmaker for his position. Toronto's front office has typically liked players who can play make regardless of their position, and he's a good passer out of the post. And I think that he's a guy who gets the job done. It might not look pretty all the time, but it's a lot of fun, and I think that he's a lottery pick, and this is a good. I think it's a good spot for him.
So then the next one, I think this is where I don't even know how to go about this because
Yeah,
I'm pretty convinced that Houston will not be at 10. Uh,
nobody thinks Houston's picking at 10, period.
so I
But
mean, you could,
I'll tell you
yeah,
what
you
I'd
could
like to do here, which is I'm going to act as if they are, and that's just kind of the only way to really handle it. And I think that if you're acting as if they are, I'm going to go with Colin Murray Boyles from South Carolina. He is probably the most impactful of the players that we're still seeing left on the board. He is somewhat of a positional fit and need for them, especially if potentially Jabari Smith is moved as a potentially versatile defensive player. He's a little bit older, so he might be able to crack the rotation. He's not old; he's a sophomore, but he's not a freshman. Everybody else that's been picked so far was a freshman last year. So I at least think that if the Rockets make this pick, Colin Murray Boyles is probably the guy. The other guy who I think they would have an eye on is the guy who I'm going to go with the next pick for. So I can get into that right away because I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on the Rockets. But I think if the Rockets keep the pick, Colin Murray Boyles is probably a name worth watching, simply because he is a pretty good defensive player. He's got some Draymond Green comps as a defensive player. I don't think he's Draymond Green at all, but he is maybe a Draymond Green light, and you hear that a lot with prospects. I don't know if we'll actually see him reach that potential, but I think that that's the kind of guy who maybe Ime Udoka would consider giving minutes to. And if they use him in the G League, they use him in the G League. But I think they'll probably trade the pick.
agree. Very good chance they just not even have a first round pick or maybe just a very late one. Um, so yeah, and who do you have at 11?
At 11, I have got Carter Bryant. He was a freshman at Arizona last year. People weren't necessarily sure if he was going to come out or not. He was testing the waters. He was somebody that really had a great pre-draft process. He looked good during March Madness, during the games that Arizona played and won. He is, I think, somebody who was a real riser and was able to say that he was able to stay in the draft after testing the waters for a little bit. I think that some people thought he may have gone back to Arizona, but I think that at 11 at a lottery pick, that's a name that Portland's going to have their eyes on. I think some of the other guys that they'll have their eyes on are Kasper Siakachunas, and Yegor Demine, and maybe Noah Singwe. So those are the other guys I think Portland's are going to look at right now. But I think the top player on that board for me would be Carter Bryant. So also just love the name Carter Bryant. That's two awesome little basketball tributes right there between Vince Carter and Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. So far compared to your last mock, you've got the biggest risers being Maluak, Carter, and Colin. Not too much, but biggest risers since 3 weeks ago. All right, we got three more. Who do you like at 12 right now?
So Chicago's another team that I just can't quite figure out, man. I really don't know what they want to do. I will say that if they want to be fun, they can pick the same guy that I had last time, which is Kasper Siakachunas. He is Lithuanian, like Arturas Karnasivas and also Matas Bazelis. And if they want to have Team Lithuania, they could do that. I don't think he makes the most sense for Chicago, but also I don't really know what to do with Chicago either in terms of what their direction is right now. I mean, what do you think Chicago's best need is right now? Like, what would you do if you were Chicago from a drafting perspective? And I could probably tell you who that guy would be.
Uh, God, I would
Right? Like, it's a
say
tough one, isn't it?
I think just best player available. I know they have a lot of guards. I don't care if that's the best player, just take them. I don't really think it matters with them because like They might draft by need because they might feel like they're ready to take another step forward. Uh, I think you got to take the best player available if you're the Bulls.
Well, let's go with Kasper Siakachunas. Let's keep Lithuania in the building. He went to Illinois for college. That's got to be worth something, right? I mean, to stay local. Matas Pazelis is also from Chicago. That's 2 years in a row of just kind of doing the same thing. If this is something that Arturas Karnisovas cares about, maybe it continues. So this is the one that I feel the least confident in, probably. But also kind of Kasparis is not a bad player. He's got good positional size. He struggled a little bit down the stretch, but he led all freshmen in unassisted three-pointers made last season, which is something that you want to see from a guard. The guy who can create his own three-pointer is a guy that's going to have value in the league, and he's not not for nothing. Like he's a pretty good playmaker himself too. So I like it. It'd be it's really just the rest of what Chicago's doing that I'm confused about. And so once I have a more clear sense of that, I could kind of have a better sense of whether or not this is a good
Yeah.
pick or not. But for now, I think this is the guy we're gonna go with.
I would say for these next few picks, because now we're at the point uh, where movement is a lot more realistic. Especially like the Hawks, they have two picks in this draft. The Spurs have two picks in this draft. So now I think is where like if you can think of some teams that would trade up, then to kind of help with this kind of help with how you get to your conclusion. That could help. Like for example, like obviously you're gonna decide who it is for Atlanta, but Memphis is a team I could see moving up to this range. OKC is a team I could see moving up to this range if they want to consolidate some picks. So just I guess just to kind of I don't know if that helps or makes it more complicated, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that um, you know, it's interesting, right? Because um I don't necessarily know where each team um has each guy ranked at this point based on who's available, but I could tell you that I think that based off of who I would pick at this point, I think Atlanta would probably look at Noah Singwe. He's the guy that I think has been the best. He's really difficult to evaluate because he has not been to the States for the pre-draft process. He's still playing in the playoffs right now overseas. So I think the teams have had a slightly difficult time evaluating him. So if he falls out of the lottery, it would probably likely not necessarily be because of talent, but because he wasn't able to attend the NBA draft combine. He did some measurements in Treviso, and his measurements were good. Um, but I think that ultimately, um, it's because he's still actively playing. So I don't know. I think that that's probably the guy that I'm gonna go with. But I think that he's a tough guy to get a read on right now, just because he's not met with teams. He's not been a part of the combine, but he's been playing really, really well recently during the playoff stretch and overseas.
All right, and then the last pick in the lottery, then we'll wrap this up. Who are you feeling for right now?
Um, so there's a couple names. Joan Berringer is one that's been coming up a lot for San Antonio, another player from France that I think could potentially you make some noise in the draft. He had great measurements recently. I think that also giving Wembanyama another French teammate would be something that San Antonio's front office would consider. I think that that's a guy that they're going to have a serious look at. But I think that another name that I think just deserves mention right now that I think we should put here, regardless of whether or not it's to actually San Antonio or to whatever team potentially trades here, because I do think San Antonio can make a trade here, is Cedric Coward. He's probably had the best pre-draft process of anybody in terms of, just his ability to rise. And I think that I may have had him 15 last time, and I think um to continue that trend, I want to have him, in the lottery. And I think that San Antonio would gladly use a guy like him. Memphis is a guy that he's a guy that I think would fit with Memphis as well. So I think that that's where I have Cedric going, but I think that he's someone that's going to be getting looks, in that general range for sure, starting from uh, probably about the second half of the lottery. He
All
was a former
right.
D3, yeah, former D3 player turned lottery pick. Is a great story.
All right, Brian. That was awesome. I enjoyed doing this now. I want to talk about something that you've been working on. I hope this shows up nicely. All right. So I've got one of your recent interviews up for everyone to see with Con Knipple. So you're working right now on a video series interviewing several of the draft prospects. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I have now had a chance to talk to five players from this class with Tom Knippel, Jeremiah Fears, Asa Newell, Thomas Sorber, and Cedric Coward. All of these guys were fantastic interviews. I did a decent amount of research and intel into figuring out who were going to be, the best conversations, and those were five guys that came up. I think that all of them did really well in their conversations with me, and it was really great to get to know each of them. This is, something I've done for many years now is talk to prospects before the draft, and it really helps with my process of getting to know, what they bring to the table and what their personalities are like and what they might like the most about, certain fits and what they're going to play like in the NBA and just, who they are as people. And I think that, Khan was a great guy for episode one. He's been getting a ton of buzz recently. And it's really just helpful for me to be able to have the chance to speak with these guys and learn how they think the game, right, and break it down with them. So the series is called Prospect Park. We do it at USA Today for the win. ftw.usatoday.com. That's where you can find my work, and it's also on YouTube, where we're able to share full-length interviews. So we've got multiple episodes of that coming out. Asa Newell from Georgia, who's a guy who I think is going to start getting looks, right after the lottery or so, and kind of in the lottery as well. Is another player that came out today, and we've got some more episodes coming out next week before the draft, and I'll be at the draft on the red carpet to get some more interviews as well with some of the guys as they enter the room. So plenty of stuff to look forward to with my draft coverage.
Yeah, everyone, make sure you're following Brian on Twitter and Blue Sky at his name, at Bryan Kalbrosky. Now's the best time of year to do that. He's been he's been doing research on the draft, doing mock drafts for a long time, but he's also put in a lot of work getting to know a lot of these prospects over the years and showing out who they are so you all can better understand these players. So highly suggest you check out his work. He's going to be releasing more of these over the coming weeks. But yeah, everyone, thank you for tuning in. I really enjoyed doing this. Brian, thank you for joining. And make sure to follow me again on EOC Goslin. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky. Salary cap analysis instantly from all transactions as they come in the coming weeks. Subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcasts, and the Substack as well. And I will be pretty active. I got a video coming out tomorrow, probably a couple more streams if things